In the winter of 1891, a strange draft pattern on this Colorado ridge turned ordinary chimneys into traps. Smoke didn't rise. It dropped, folding back into the lungs of sleeping settlers. But one cabin stayed perfectly clear. Neighbors called its chimney an affront to sense because it was built backwards. It was February. A pocket thermometer nailed outside the trading post read -40 degrees as the valley tightened like a held breath. Ember beds glowed across the ridge, but the smoke in most cabins refused to climb. It crept along beams, slid into corners, crawled under quilts. Children coughed in their sleep. A woman tried sweeping the haze toward the door with a blanket, but the moment she cracked it open, a wall of white fury forced her back. Men cupped hands to smoke-stung faces, their breath turning to crystals. Thin iron pipes, cheap, quick, familiar, couldn't stay warm enough to draw. Every ember threw light into a world that couldn't breathe. But farther along the ridge, the storm met something different. While men battled choking air in their own homes, Tomas Calder's cabin smelled only of simmered stew and dry pine. His chimney didn't reach for the roofline at all. It ran a low, broad course of stone, curving gently before slipping its exit beneath the leeward eave, exactly opposite of what every settler believed a chimney should do. The very design they mocked was the one the blizzard could not defeat. But one cabin stayed clear. Why? Tomas Calder had spent more years in these mountains than most could count. Traps, rivers, high passes. He had learned the language of wind, the way other men learned scripture. While neighbors raised thin iron pipes through their roofs, Thomas laid river stones into a low, broad chimney that seemed to defy every rule settlers trusted. At the trading post, men shook their heads. Nonsense. Suicide. You build that wrong enough, you're going to wake up in smoke. But Thomas kept working, measuring with a piece of cord and marking stone faces with streaks of soot. In private, he sketched the idea that bothered everyone else. A short, broad throat instead of a tall pipe, a curved back that slowed the smoke, and, most unusual, an exit tucked low beneath the leeward eave. His entire chimney ran only around 4 feet inside the cabin, short enough that heat stayed in the stones rather than racing into the sky. Tomas knew what the settlers didn't. Flow matters more than height. When wind slammed into the ridge, that little deflector stone made the air jump, creating a tiny vacuum that helped pull smoke away from the hearth, even during storms. He measured everything: throat width, flue curve, clay density, without ever pretending to be an engineer. He simply studied the way river currents spun under rock shelves and applied it to the movement of warm air. The cabin was his laboratory, the ridge his teacher. As the days grew colder, whispers followed the jokes. People noticed Tomas's family didn't wake coughing. His cabin didn't reek of spent smoke by morning. The stones along his hearth stayed warm long after the fire fell to embers. The wooden pipes they favored cooled too quickly. Their drafts faltered each time a wind gust pressed the wrong direction. Smoke hesitated and then dropped back into the room. They all knew the problem well. They just didn't believe Tomas had solved it. By late October, the ridge held 2 certainties. Winter would be brutal. Tomas Calder's chimney looked absolutely, undeniably wrong. But the wind had already chosen which design it favored. The neighbors laughed. Then the wind turned. To understand why Tomas's stack worked, you have to step inside the small physics of a winter hearth. Most chimneys count on a single idea. Heat rises, and they shoot smoke upward through a narrow pipe as fast as possible. But Tomas worked with a different intuition. He didn't want speed. He wanted contact. He widened the throat so the smoke would slow. Slower smoke leaves its warmth behind. Stone drinks heat the way dry soil drinks a rainstorm, slowly at first, then deeply. Measured values tell the story. While his neighbors relied on iron pipes rising 10 or 12 feet, pipes that chilled almost instantly in mountain wind, Tomas's entire flue was barely 4 feet long. In practice, he had built something closer to a heat battery than a chimney. Modern analysis shows that a stone throat like his can keep a cabin 30 to 40 degrees warmer than a thin pipe hut using the exact same amount of wood. That difference is the gap between shivering in your coat and sleeping in your shirt sleeves. But length wasn't his only trick. Tomas shaped the flue's back into a subtle curve that created a standing eddy, a pocket where smoke momentarily gathered and left even more heat behind. That eddy also kept the flow gentle, preventing the violent surge that sometimes sucked sparks straight into a roof beam. And then came the decision that made neighbors think he was touched in the head. Instead of sending smoke straight out the roofline, he tucked the exit low beneath the leeward eave, where the mountain wind naturally slipped past. A single deflector stone forced that wind to jump, creating a tiny vacuum that helped pull the last of the smoke outward. When the ridge winds roared, Tomas's chimney didn't stall. It tightened, drawing better, not worse. Stone, clay, geometry, and the hard-won sense of how air moves across a lonely ridge. That was all he used. He never claimed invention. He only trusted what the land taught him. When the blizzard hit, that odd diagram would be the difference between breathing and suffocating. The blizzard arrived like a predator, quiet at first, then relentless. Temperatures plunged past minus 40 degrees, and the wind rose with a force that hammered every cabin. Snow didn't just fall. It flew sideways, grinding against shutters and forcing itself into every gap it could find. Inside most homes, firelight flickered behind thickening smoke. Iron pipes, already thin, already cold, lost their warmth in minutes. Without heat inside them, the draft reversed. Smoke curled back down, thick as wool. In one cabin, a mother pressed her children to the floor, holding wet rags over their faces. In another, a man clawed at the stovepipe, trying to warm it with a lantern. It was useless. The wind outside didn't allow upward flow. It forced everything back inside. Meanwhile, in Tomas Calder's home, the storm met a different geometry. His stones were warm. The curved throat was working exactly as he'd intended. And while the wind crushed drafts elsewhere, his low eave exit and deflector stone created the very suction he needed. Inside, the air remained clean enough that a child could sleep without coughing. When the first family stumbled toward Tomas's cabin, faces raw, lungs burning, he opened the door without a word. He did not ask names. He simply moved blankets, fed a small stick to the ember bed, and guided them toward the warm stone that held the room steady. More came. 7 people in total found refuge in that low stone room while the storm consumed the ridge. Their breath steadied. Color crept back into their cheeks. On the rest of the ridge, the night was a losing battle. Iron pipes didn't just get cold, they froze shut. Creosote hardened into ice, sealing the drafts completely. Sparks choked out. Firelight died into a suffocating haze. 2 chimneys collapsed under rime, timbers snapping like brittle bones. In 3 cabins, families spent the night huddled on the floor with wet rags over their mouths, choosing the burn of smoke over the killing cold outside. Children wheezed through the dark. Parents whispered to keep them awake, terrified they'd fall asleep and never rise again. By dawn, they were alive. But their homes were wrecked, their lungs scorched, and their faith in the usual way of things shaken to its core. The wind eased, snow softened, the ridge exhaled. One cabin, only one, had remained warm, breathable, and steady through the whiteout, and its chimney had been the one everyone mocked. When dawn came, the proof was in the ash-black sky. Spring exposed the full tally of winter's tests. Some chimneys lay in crumbled piles, others leaned like broken limbs. Tomas walked the line of cabins, not with swagger, but with a board and a stick of chalk. The same men who once laughed at him now leaned on their railings, squinting at his hand-drawn arcs and measurements. Tomas didn't ask for apologies, didn't claim invention. He simply showed them why his 4-foot stone throat held heat while their 12-foot iron pipes froze. He pointed to curves, to clay density, to a deflector stone no larger than a fist that had made the difference between breathing and choking. What followed was not a lesson. It was a community retrofit. The mason, who once teased Tomas, spent an entire morning repointing a neighbor's broken stack. A teenager hauled river stones in a sled, his breath puffing with pride. Families worked shoulder to shoulder, replacing long iron runs with short, broad stone throats that stored heat instead of bleeding it away. Tomas moved among them like a patient foreman, guiding where to seat the curved back, how to pack the clay, how to angle the exit to catch the leeward vacuum the ridge created each afternoon. By the next winter, the trading post ledger told a quiet but unmistakable story. Orders for iron stovepipe dwindled to nothing. Fuel consumption dropped. Homes stayed warmer longer on half the wood. And the true victory revealed itself in the silence. Fewer coughs in the night, fewer children kept home from chores, smoke that went out instead of in. The ridge had finally understood. Survival wasn't about fighting the mountain with iron. It was about reading the mountain with stone. By spring, nearly every cabin on the ridge had a backward stack. Years later, the storm was remembered less for its violence and more for what it revealed. In field notes and hearthstones, Tomas Calder's measurements survived: curves, throat widths, and the low eave exit that turned a simple cabin into a refuge. Nothing he built was grand. Nothing was meant to impress. He simply shaped his craft to the wind that shaped the ridge. If you believe that survival comes from reading nature rather than fighting it, you're in the right place. Join us here at Frontier Tales of America as we uncover more quiet engineering from the edge. Solutions carved from Dante, wind, cold, and patience. Next episode, we're digging into a layered roof technique that kept an entire mountain settlement alive through 3 months of bitter cold, and the indigenous knowledge that inspired it.